The Purple Wizard has disappeared, but make no mistake about it, his legacy has a lasting impact, and his magic should affect Kansas State football for generations to come. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, teaming up with SG1 Sports to bring you college football instant analysis, discussion, and debate. And we look back at the legacy and the coaching tenure of Bill Snyder at Kansas State, one of the greatest of all time. There could be an argument made that Bill Snyder is the greatest football coach of all time, which seems ridiculous because of the lack of national championships, the just few Big 12 conference championships, and not the consistent eye-popping 12-0, 11-1 seasons stacked up over and over and over. But putting his accomplishments into context, where he did it is incredible. And if you look at that correlation and that comparison between Kansas State without Bill Snyder and Kansas State with Bill Snyder, it's the most stark contrast of any football program in the history of college football. Kansas State's all-time football record with any coach is 531 wins, 647 losses, and 41 ties. Kansas State football all-time is 116 games under 500. All right, Bill Snyder made everything completely change in 1989, his first season on campus. 1989, Kansas State went 1-10. The magic wasn't instant, but it was quick. So consider in 1989 at that point that Bill Snyder comes in to Kansas State after serving as Hayden Fry's offensive coordinator at Iowa. He takes over a football program that had gone winless in 27 consecutive games. No wins in 27 consecutive games, 0-26-1. They had gone to one bowl game in their 77-year history. One bowl game, the measly 1982 Independence Bowl. They had 2 winning seasons in 34 years. So we can give him a break for going 1-10. But after that, Bill Snyder goes 214 wins, 107 losses with 1 tie, 214 and 107. So he's 107 games over 500 at Kansas State. The rest of the coaches at Kansas State are negative 223. It all started at Kansas State in 1912. The first team went 8-2. Interesting schedule here. You had the likes of some familiar foes in Colorado and Texas A&M. The 2 losses were to Kansas and Nebraska. But the wins also included Haskell and Washburn. So a much different college football era back in 1912. The 8-2 quickly disappeared, and Kansas State was awful, consistently awful. The worst program in the history of college football, as dubbed by Sports Illustrated back when Bill Snyder took over the program in 89, Futility U. There was a stretch in the 1940s and 50s in which Kansas State went 17-100. There was a spell during the 60s in which they went 11-77. And then just prior to Bill Snyder, I mentioned the 0-27, which also included 5-50 going into the Bill Snyder era of 1989. And then it all changed in 1989. 1-10, 5-6, 7-4. Kansas State football took off. And then by the 4th season, they were winning in double digits and finishing in the top 25 in the nation. All right. When Bill Snyder took over, he instituted stability. He instituted fundamentals. His football teams would be marked by not making mistakes, making the fundamental plays, being smart teams, heads up, poised, and they knew the game, knew the game management, knew situations, situational football, and also special teams. Kansas State has routinely been the or among the best in special teams in college football, as recently as 2017, ranked with all the advanced metrics as the best special teams team in all of college football. So that is made up for the lack of offensive explosion and defensive just wow-type prowess. Very good fundamental defensive teams that he established in his 27 seasons solid offensive teams that could run the ball and pass it when they needed to. Developed a couple wide receivers to the NFL of note, as most of you know. All right, from 1993 through 2013, that's 11 seasons. Bill Snyder's teams won double digits 7 times. They lost more than 3 games in those 11 seasons. Only one time they had a 6-6 year in there. Otherwise, they were churning out 11-2 type seasons over and over and over and over. 7 double-digit seasons in 11 years. They were ranked in the top 10 6 times in 11 years. They were ranked at the end of the season in the top 25 10 of the 11 seasons. They won 4 division championships. All right, kind of the pinnacle of Kansas State football occurred in 1998. So this is the pinnacle, but it's also the big letdown. In 1998, Kansas State started 11-0. They went to the Big 12 championship game. They were a fairly substantial favorite against Texas A&M, a team that was 10-2, head coached by R.C. Slocum. Mention the name of Sir Parker around Manhattan, Kansas, and you will get a scowl. I'm sure it's a very friendly town and campus, but that would be the one name that would solicit a scowl, a menacing stare. Sir Parker scored 2 touchdowns, including a 2-point conversion, 14 points down the stretch to erase a 27-12 Kansas State lead in the Big 12 championship game in 1998. Kansas State was that close from advancing to the first ever BCS national championship game against Tennessee as the number 1 team in the country. That was a historic day in college football involving Tennessee, Kansas State, Texas A&M, UCLA, and Ohio State. All right. 4 division championships during those 11 years and consistent top 10 teams every year after every year. But losing that Big 12 championship game really hurt this program. They missed the national championship game that year, led by one of the all-time, along with Colin Klein, who finished in the top 3 in the Heisman voting just a few years ago, Michael Bishop, who accounted for 37 touchdowns, 23 through the air, and 14 rushing touchdowns that year. Sir Parker, 3rd and 17, 32-yard touchdown reception in overtime. Texas A&M wins 36-33 in double overtime to deny Kansas State in 1998. Consider this. This is inexplicable, you would think, with the likes of Alabama, Notre Dame, Ohio State, LSU. Well, back in this time, mid to late 90s, who were the dominant teams? Well, it was Ohio State, Michigan, not USC. Texas just starting to come back. Oklahoma just starting to come back from a 90s slump. That in 7 years, Kansas State was the only team in college football over the course of 7 years to have 6 11-win seasons. That's how good Kansas State was. So for you younger viewers who have not been locked in on Kansas State football history, but have been watching for, let's say, the last 5 or 10 years, you would say, oh, Kansas State's decent. They're Mississippi State, or they're somebody of that level. They're Pitt. They're Washington State. They're somebody like that. No, they were a dominant football team. Maybe not necessarily eye-popping, freakish athletes, but they got the results. That was the peak of the Bill Snyder era. Consider that when Bill Snyder retired the first time in 2005, that Bill Snyder had 136 wins at Kansas State in 17 years, and all the other coaches at Kansas State had 136 wins, the same total, in 54 years. Barry Switzer said, this guy is not the coach of the year. He's not the coach of the decade. He's the coach of the century in college football. That astounding was the turnaround at Kansas State under Bill Snyder. Ron Prince took over, and he should have been able to continue to build upon the Bill Snyder legacy, the foundation that he had built. But just to emphasize the greatness of Bill Snyder, Ron Prince in 3 seasons at Kansas State from 2006, 7, and 8 went 17-20 after Bill Snyder was winning 75-80% of his games. Ron Prince comes in and goes 17-20. In steps Bill Snyder, 69-year-old Bill Snyder again. And his second stint, not quite as prolific, not as quite as successful as his first stint, but still over these 10 seasons in his second tenure, 8 of 10 were winning seasons. He finished with 8 bowl appearances and finished ranked 3 times in the last 10 years. 2012 would be the highlight. The team started 10-0, was ranked number 1 in the BCS rankings at that point before dropping the last game of the season to Baylor, knocking them out of a championship race in 2012. Of course, that was the Alabama-Notre Dame year in the national championship game. Then they lost to Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl 35-17 to finish 11-2 and number 11 in the country. Bill Snyder did win his final 2 bowl games. Unfortunately, he was denied a bowl appearance this year as his 5-6 Wildcats came back and gave Iowa State a scare down the stretch, but couldn't quite pull it out in the final game of the regular season this year and finishing 5-7. But his final 2 bowl appearances, Kansas State defeated a much heavily favored Texas A&M team out of the SEC in the Texas Bowl a couple of years ago, and then last season against UCLA in the Cactus Bowl, losing by 11 at halftime early. Kansas State came back in true Bill Snyder fashion, dominated the second half, and won it over UCLA. Kansas State just announced in the last day or so that despite Bill Snyder only finishing 2 years of the extended 5-year contract, that they would still honor his legacy and his greatness and his contribution, which I have tried to summarize statistically, but really can't be overall in terms of the impact that should, again, as long as they hire quality people going forward, should continue. It's been a team that he has developed time and time again, not based on recruiting rankings, but based on junior college transfers and finding the right fit for his system over and over again. You will not find Bill Snyder's recruiting classes ranked in the top 10 in the nation like many of his teams were. Not even ranked in the top 25. Not even many times ranked in the top 50 in the nation. He truly defined the term coach 'em up at Kansas State. There is the tenure of Bill Snyder. Would love to hear your comments, especially from Kansas State fans, about Bill Snyder at the age of 79, retiring at Kansas State. And, wow. He must have been good. He's a legend at Kansas State. Bill Snyder hangs him up, and what a job that he did. Let's honor the greatness of Bill Snyder. Void of national championships, void of prolific records over and over and over. Consider the circumstances, consider the history, consider the location. Bill Snyder, legend, already in the College Football Hall of Fame. Mark Rogers TV and SG1 Sports bringing you college football analysis every day. So lock it in right here at SG1 Sports. Join me at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, where we break it down each and every day. If you're a college football fan, it's a must. We'll see you next time.